Howdy, folks. Happy Tuesday. Just want to say the 72 Dolphins, no matter how many of them are left, are a bunch of friggin' losers because they have to pop champagne every year when the last undefeated team loses. And last night, the Philadelphia Eagles lost to Washington in Philadelphia, which was not the way to go because that's not a very good team. But I just think that's one of the reasons why, Russ, even though I hate the Patriots, I wanted them to win that 1 year so they could stick it up the rear end.
No, I get it. I mean, the one thing I could say is, I lived through the 72 Dolphins. I remember how great they were. I had a neighbor that turned into a Dolphins fan, even living in New York. Like, they had some impact. I'd see ESPN maybe doing like a special or something on them, a documentary. And I just want to see the revisionist history on this because Miami was lousy in the 70s, not the team, the city. Mm-hmm. And so it's like, I want to see what they do to Miami and say what it was like back then, because nobody cared about Miami back then. But the team was great. They cared about the team. There was nothing you could do about them. And I was particularly, as a Jet fan, not a fan of them or Don Shula, who left the tarp off the field during a playoff game during a monsoon one time and said, "Oh, really? Did we leave the tarp off?" Because, the Jets had the best running game in the league. So, these are the kinds of things. And passing game too. They had, Ken O'Brien was pretty damn good too. So these are the kinds of things that make me not like the Dolphins. But I'm going to switch to a fun topic. I woke up today and I saw that Randy Macho Man Savage was trending, and there's very few. I've watched a lot of who knows why, Joe. You never.
I was like, well, okay.
Well, we're in the last days of Twitter, so I thought I'd talk about it.
Yeah, that's fair.
Last days.
We're in the last days of Twitter.
Oh, bull crap. Whatever.
Okay. But anyhow, I thought it would be fun to talk about because for, the on and off that I am with wrestling and all the times I've watched over the years, I do remember his first televised match for the WWE, which is rare because generally you don't remember it. And a lot of times guys go through a metamorphosis. So like, Steve Austin was nothing like Stone Cold when he first started. And he had to go through like this change, this metamorphosis. But Randy Savage was Randy Savage from the very beginning, and he was killing it in promos, and he was doing the high wire wrestling, which was fun from the top rope. And then you find out all those little things like, hey, he was a pro baseball player and everything else. There's a good documentary on the Behind the Ring thing. There's a thing called Behind the Ring. You look it up for Randy, and it's really good. And I'm not to say, look, there's obviously wrestlers are always going to have these weird lives, but as far as listening to him doing promos and watching him wrestle, it was pure fun.
Okay. Yeah.
My favorite part of Randy was that the voice that he used, like people was like, that was actually his speaking voice. Like, and it's just like, it's not an act. That's just how he talks. That's how I talk, brother. And it's like, what? Like, how does he need like a steady supply of lozenges? Because
think about the Slim Jim commercials, the impact he had with that.
Yeah, that's true. Geez, I mean, everybody. Well, I don't know about everybody. I'm certainly people younger than me probably might not remember Snap Into It, but I mean, like, but even still, like, if you saw the first Spider-Man movie, he was Bonesaw. So it's people are like, wow, who's this guy? He's great. And it's Macho Man. But I loved it when it was him and his brother, Randy being in there at the same time, and his gimmick of being the genius was so good.
Yeah.
And like he's throwing frisbees out with like stuff on it. It's like, all right. And it was just such a goofy thing. And I don't know that they ever wrestled against each other. I don't remember.
I don't think they did.
They did.
But I thought that was funny because like they're, actual brothers, both wrestlers. And I don't think they ever faced each other, even though like, you had like the Guerreros like Chavo and Eddie. They would go against each other and mess around.
I think because Randy had so much power in the league that they didn't make him do it. But every other brother ever in the history of wrestling, they made one turn on the other for at least a few months so they can get a couple pay-per-views out of it. But I don't think they ever did with him. I think you're right.
Yeah, it was. I don't know. There's a lot about 80s wrestling where it's kind of cringe and you're like, I can't remember that. But so much of it was so over the top and fun and silly and trying to create some of those stories that they did. I mean, it's funny looking back on some of them and some of the great rivalries that happened just like kind of out of the blue without without even needing it. Just two guys that really worked really hard and were perfect against each other.
Like he was in my hotel once, right? And I happened to get there like, I don't know, 11 o'clock on a Saturday morning. And I just got my stuff put away. I'm walking around and I said, oh my God, Randy Savage just left the premises here and he was at the restaurant. I saw him standing there for a minute. I was desperately trying to find the restaurant manager. And then when I found, I don't know, the GM or somebody, he's like, yeah, they're not ready yet. I'm like, you just let a guy walk out who probably would have eaten a couple $100 worth of food.
Right.
He's looking for food, man. What is wrong? I just always remember.
Wrestler, man. Like they got to eat.
Yeah. Well, the thing I remember, because I remember him coming in and I remember him having a certain level of success. And at the beginning, I don't remember Elizabeth being part of it.
She wasn't.
But then he gained a higher level of fame because of Elizabeth and because she was so hot.
Yeah, no question. I mean, it definitely helped elevate him. That was when they felt like everybody should have a manager, but he didn't have a manager at the beginning. He
didn't have the grand.
He didn't need one.
No, he didn't, because that was the thing.
I mean, Elizabeth was a valet, so it's
right.
It's a little different. But she also helped the matches, so it's good.
Yeah, but the thing about it was, if a guy couldn't do promos great or needed a push over the top, then you had a manager. He didn't need any of that.
Right. Yeah, no, it's like some guys, like, you know, when we're talking like back in the day, some guys would be teamed up with like Classy Freddie Blassie or Mr.
Grand Wizard of Wrestling. Yes.
Right. You know, like, and you know, those guys were managers because they could talk and they talked the talk. They did all the crap talk for everybody. You know, even Bobby the Brain. I mean, nobody was better than nobody was better. Nobody was better than he, and he was the best ever. But
he was tremendous. I mean, yeah, I do think he was the best. But yeah, I mean, I remember we interviewed Bobby the Brain once for a long-term interview, and he was unbelievable with the stories, and he could talk and talk and talk, and he's interesting. And so, yeah, if you had one of those guys, you didn't have to do a lot. And that's why, you know, someone like at the beginning, like Superstar Billy Graham, he wasn't good at promos at the beginning, but then he got better at it. Yeah. And then that's when he dumped the Grand Wizard because he didn't need him anymore.
Right. And also that name for a manager, a little tough there, but it was, I mean, like, I don't remember anything about Superstar Billy Graham, but I know whenever he popped in for like there'd be random things. And I'm like, wow, this guy looks a lot like Hulk Hogan. And then it was like, oh, that's who Hulk Hogan was trying to get his look based off of. Like, okay, well,
yeah. And remember at the beginning of his career, he was the Incredible Hulk Hogan.
That's right. Jeez.
He started as the Incredible Hulk Hogan, and he was a lot bigger. And then he went away. I think he was filming Rocky, and then he came back, and he was a little more in shape because I think he was trying to compete with Andre because he was like,
yeah, I think he was more bulked up. I mean, and clearly, you know, those guys had their help too. Probably helped him trim down. But the one thing I hated about him in the Rocky movie, how they lied about how tall he was. What did they put, like 6'7" or something? It was ridiculous.
Yeah, 300 and something pounds.
He was 6'7" next to Stallone because Stallone is short. But I mean,
Stallone's 5'8". Like, of course he looks 6'7".
Yeah, and I have to say this because I saw a little snippet of an interview with Jesse the Body. Okay. Him and Hulk Hogan, if they were in the same room together, they would probably kill each other.
Yeah, they didn't like each other.
Oh, no. They used to be friends, and then apparently Hulk screwed him over in some way, and now he's like completely dead.
Well, here's the thing. I think what happened was when Hulk Hogan became like the Babe Ruth of wrestling, which didn't take that long.
Right.
He could control the locker room. He could control who was making money and who wasn't. Mm-hmm. And there were a lot of wrestlers that didn't like that. They basically were jealous of him. And look, he's not the greatest guy in the world. I get it. The one time I interviewed him, it was at the 04 Stanley Cup. The only reason he agreed to do the interview, he said, is we could talk about his daughter's singing career. And I said, fine, it's Hulk Hogan. I'm going to let him do it. But that's what he was, right? It was about the promotion and him and whatever. And he was, so in the end, I think he did create a lot of enemies.
Oh, plus there was the back in the 80s, there's the story that they wanted to create like a professional wrestlers like union.
Yeah. Yeah.
trying to protect everybody. And Hogan's like, I ain't doing that. Because
Right.
he had, Hogan controlled everything. So he was doing that. And of course, I don't think Vince was going to go along with it anyways. But if Hogan did, then he would be kind of stuck.
Of course, sure. That would have helped.
That was what it was.
Hogan nuked all of it. And that's why there was a lot of resentment with him. And I don't
That's what it was about. That's what it was about. Apparently, Vince McMahon had to testify in front of Congress. And at that point, he spilled the beans that Hulk sort of undercut the ability of them to unionize, and Jesse the Body was at the forefront of trying to get them to unionize. So
he's right to do, because guys do need medical. I mean, everybody, men and women in wrestling, need medical insurance. That's crazy that they don't have it.
Yeah,
I don't know. That still baffles me that it's like that. Like I
know.
Not like it's a human stunt show, man. Protect your people.
They pay all their own travel expenses. They have to pay all their own medical. It's crazy.
All right, let's get started. Hello, Hockey World. Today is Tuesday, November 15th, 2022.
I'm Russ Cohen from Sportsology.
Oh, hi, I'm Joe Yerdon. I'm with Bleacher Report. Sorry.
Sorry.
And I'm Michael Agello, and this is the HockeyBuzzcast here on HockeyBuzz.com. All right, let's start with some of the games last night. Just quickly go through them. The Islanders, Russ, now they're 11-6. I have to say their schedule's been a little bit soft. They played the Ottawa Senators last night, beat them 4-2 with Varlamov in net. I can't take anything away from them. I think they're doing better than I thought they were going to do, but they're still not scoring a ton of goals. And I still think in the end that's going to hurt them. But, you can't take away the fact that they're 11-6 right now.
There's, like we talked about yesterday, at least 10 teams in the NHL that right now are a little too easy to get points against. And the Ottawa Senators are one of them. Like they just are. And so, listen, the Islanders are always going to be able to go in and beat those kinds of teams. They'll beat them with the work ethic and the goaltending, and they'll score just enough. And this one, they're able to score a little more because Ottawa's defense is really lousy. DJ Smith's probably going to be one of the first coaches fired because they did put a lot of money into this team. If Dorian's able to get Chychrun, maybe that, helps DJ Smith a little. But in the end, I thought they were going to be better than this. I thought they were going to be gelled. Ottawa's not. The Islanders, I don't know if they've gelled, but they have a good coach. I think Lambert's proved to be a good coach, and they have one of the best goalies. So, they're going to be in it. They were always going to be in it all year anyhow.
Joe, we'll talk about the Islanders in a second, but when Russ started talking about the Senators, I was skeptical about the Senators. I admit I liked the additions of DeBrincat, bring in the stability of Cam Talbot to offset what I think is it's sort of a wolf or sort of a mirage in Anton Forsberg, because I don't think he's a very good goaltender. But they signed Stützle, they signed Norris, but I didn't buy in the fact their defense is below average, and I didn't think that they would be able to make enough progress to contend with those top four in the Atlantic. And I think that's been a problem. And Talbot's absence has been a problem, and now Norris getting hurt has been a problem.
Yeah, it's a lot of it's tough. I mean, Norris losing him so early in the season just it doesn't help. I mean, he's one of your top centers, second line, first line center. Like that's tough. I mean, it's impossible to replace that. I mean, 30+ goal guy last year. That's hard. Not having Talbot to start, I think that's survivable because Forsberg was pretty good last year.
Yeah.
All things considered. But Mike, you hit it on the head. The defense was an issue. And every year I'm like, they got to find a way to relieve Thomas Chabot and make sure he doesn't play 35 minutes a game. And they haven't done it yet. And, I think the expectation was that when Jake Sanderson got into the lineup, it's like, okay, well, he'll help out. Well, he's a rookie playing his first handful of NHL games. Like you gotta pace yourself a little bit with him and know that it's going to be a little rough for him to start. So, listen, everybody else is kind of rough. I mean, Artem Zub is okay. I think he's pretty decent, but Zaitsev,
Travis Hamonic. I mean,
it's filling it with guys that were good maybe 5 years ago, and that's not, it's hard. You're not gonna be able to survive that for too long, and they haven't even gotten a chance to get out to not survive anything. They've just gotten out so flat.
Yeah.
But just back
and they won't have Matt Murray to pull him out of it. Sorry.
Jeez. By the way, he's coming back tonight, Russ. So
Christmas is coming too, Mike.
No, he's actually.
I know. I get it.
Okay. We'll talk about that in a minute. Geez, Russ. I'd still take Matt Murray with one game over Jack Campbell, the way Jack Campbell's playing right now. But okay. The Flames beat the LA Kings 6-5 last night. Jonathan Huberdeau, Mangiapane. I mean, this Joe, this team I thought was going to be guaranteed top 3 in the Pacific. They've really struggled. They're not getting the greatest of goaltending from Markstrom. Kadri started off strong, and now he's sort of slowed a little bit. They're starting to get offense from the guys who were there, but I still think, having no Kachuk, having no Goudreau, it was logical that it would take time for them to sort of reorganize and get around these new players.
Yeah, I mean, that was foreseeable. That was definitely foreseeable. I think, in my mind, anyhow. It's a big adjustment. You go from being a team that kind of knocks other teams around. You've got Kachuk kind of being a crapster and being physical and all that, and Huberdeau is not that type of player. Like, that's just not his style of play. Kadri, Kadri, we know how Kadri plays, but again, new system, new stuff. Daryl Sutter's kind of a hard ass, so it's a big change. I mean, it's a big change for everybody involved there. But at the same point, I see Sutter saying yesterday, people asking why Huberdeau was going to be on the third line. And he's like, well, it didn't work with the first 2 lines, so let's try the third line. And I'm like, oh boy, it's starting already with Daryl. So,
but that's the thing, Joe. Like, I when they made these trades, I'm like, no matter what you think of Calgary, and I still think they're a playoff team, but no matter what you think of them, they're not going to score as much. There was no way you were getting rid of the guys they got rid of, and scoring was going to be the same. So it's not. The scoring's way down. They're one of the worst scoring teams. So now it's up to their goaltending and their defense, and that is supposed to be Sutter's specialty. So if that starts failing, they're going to have a very difficult year, because all he's going to do is exactly what you said. He'll put Huberdeau up and down. Maybe he'll play Vladar for a few games to see if he plays better than Markstrom, but he's not going to change his stripes. And they basically tailored this team to Sutter. They did. And they gave him way more defense than offense. And, we're going to find out if that was the right move or not. Because, again, you have to get to the playoffs to be a dangerous playoff team.
Yeah. With stuff this early in the season, it's great for us to talk about and have these discussion points. I always wonder if it's just, teams sometimes need like 20, 25, 30 games to work it out. I mean, and they're not far out at all. Like, 16 points. Like, I mean, 10 back of Vegas already, but Vegas is having a ridiculous start. So, they're not out of the race of anything. Certain teams that are out big now or like having surprising starts.
The only worry is
they're going to come back.
Yeah, the only worry, Joe, just because I happen to notice it, they've only played 4 away games.
Yeah.
So at some point, they're going to have a big road trip or a couple of big road trips.
Yeah, and you'd hope by that time they've got their house in order, so to speak. But, I mean, right now, Randy in the chat, who is a constant observer of the Flames, says their defensive coverage is terrible. So, and that's his stock and trade. Now, if they're not playing good defensively, then they're in deep trouble. So, the Carolina Hurricanes stay hot, and they win 3-0 over the Blackhawks, which isn't, that's not that great of a, that's not I think it's, but besides Taves and Kane, that's barely an NHL team. But Russ, Peter Kochetkov, I'll say Kochetkov, and then tomorrow we'll hear a different pronunciation.
Kochetkov, yeah, I've heard
Kochetkov, whatever. He stopped 27 shots for the shutout. Anderson is out. I haven't heard any status of how long he's going to be out, but
I haven't either. Have you noticed who got the loss?
Oh yeah, Peter. My groin is
well-traveled. Peter Mrazek.
Peter Mrazek is a guarantee of being in the Bedard sweepstakes. You know that.
Here's the reason I picked. I picked Carolina to make it to the Cup for a couple of reasons. I felt like they probably could survive Anderson being out for a while, and I don't know when he got this fragile. But since last year, he does seem a little more fragile. But I do like Kochetkov. I do. And I think as far as like an under-the-radar goalie, I've been watching him for many years. I watched him in international play, World Juniors, things like that. He's really good. So I think with the system they play, he could survive. They could survive with him. Anderson, I don't know, man. I don't know what to think of Freddie Anderson anymore.
Well,
Freddie, man. I mean, Mike, you would know better about Freddie, but from the outside perspective, the whole thing with Carolina, like running it back with Freddie and Ronta, I'm like, you're asking for trouble. Like, you know what you're getting into with, I mean, which I guess is a bonus for them. They know what they are getting into, but you don't know when the trap door is going to fall out under one or both of them.
True.
And then Kochekov has to be the guy, which I don't think that's so bad. I think Kochekov, I think he can be a very good goalie in the NHL, but I mean, I get why they kept both of those guys, because it's a safe play. I understand, but you know what is happening. Like, Ronta gets hurt every year, and you just have to prepare for it. Freddie, same thing with Freddie, and last year it came at the worst possible time ever. Right at the last couple weeks of the season. It was. So, I just, for a team with cup aspirations, that's really tough to get over. You're basically trying to luck your way into not having goalie injuries.
Well, let's just say this. The Carolina Hurricanes should avoid ex-Leafs, because Andre Kasha, I think, played like 3 games. He got another concussion. You haven't heard anything about him in a month. Freddie Anderson, he's on the IR. It's an undisclosed injury, so we don't know what it is. It could be a reoccurrence of what happened last year. And like I said, during the regular season, for the first, I'd say 3 years of his Leaf career, he was incredibly durable, because he was overplayed. It was, Mike Babcock played him 66, 66, and I think 60 the first 3 years. And he beat him into the ground. And by the time he got into the playoffs, he was exhausted. And I think that takes a toll. You see why teams are not playing goalies that many games anymore. Even the number one guys, I think the max is probably 50 to 55. So, I think in a way, Babcock and the overuse wore him down, and now he's in his early 30s, and I don't think he can do it anymore. Now, I think he can still play, but I don't think he can play 60 games anymore. And I agree with that. Yeah, they'll need to play Ronta, or they'll need to play Kochekov. And if and when he does come back, luckily Kochekov still has waivers to go back and forth to Charlotte, so they have that ability. But yeah, I mean, we have no idea how long he's going to be out. The other game last night, St. Louis beats the Colorado Avalanche 3-2. I mean, Joe, from what I'd heard from people like Elliot Friedman and Jeff Merrick and the TSN insiders, it sounded like Berube was on death's door, that he was that it was close, that if they didn't pull out of this, that he was in deep trouble. Now they're 6-8. They're not exactly the hottest team in the league, but maybe they pulled away from the brink, and maybe they get some wins over the next few weeks.
Maybe. I don't know. They're the roller coaster right now. They started off 3-0, then lost 8 in a row. Now they won 3 in a row. Like, what's the team? What's the real team here? That's where I'm stuck on that.
Yeah, we don't know.
Right. And Bennington had to go bonkers last night to stop Colorado. Like, that was that's hey, listen, he played a great game, but they need that from him more than once a week, or once every couple of weeks. Like, they need that. They need him to be 2019 guy, and he hasn't been that since 2019.
Yeah, he got close to it, but he hasn't been that.
Right. So you need him. He had a horrible start, just absolutely awful. At least last season they had Husso there to back it up and save their bacon. But Tomas Greiss is not going to be able to do that.
No, he's bad.
I'm waiting when they call up Joel Hofer from the minors. I haven't seen his stats, but
I'm so surprised they didn't try to run it back with him, or run it with him as a backup this year. I'm very surprised by that.
I just want him to play a certain amount of games, like a certain number.
Yeah, it feels a little bit like, from what I know, like Lucan in Rochester, like it feels like that. But
yeah,
I would have gotten a better backup. Honestly, like, if you're worried about Bennington and you're thinking like, okay, well, what if he has another season like that? Is Tomas Greiss the guy to save you? No, he's not. He's had a horrible time the last 2-3 years.
Right, but they can't act like they're worried about Bennington. That's the problem, because they're locked into him.
Yeah, can keep fooling yourself for a long time, but you're going to cost yourself a lot more games than not.
I mean, I like Binnington, and he played well in the playoffs until, Nazem Kadri did a Chris Kreider on him. But, they won a Stanley Cup with him being the red hot goaltender for 6 months. And I don't know if he's ever been close to. I think he's been good, but I don't think he's ever been close.
Yes, I think last year he got really close to being that guy again.
Yeah, but early in the year, Russ, he struggled.
He did. But in the playoffs, he was good.
And Husso was the number one goaltender from about December till the playoffs, and then they decided to go with the experience, the playoff experience.
But again, all we have to do is look at goaltenders that are winning cups. I mean, they're not always the top goalies.
Right.
No, that's true. Now, Joe, I know that you were down at the KeyBank Center for the morning stuff for the Vancouver Sabres game. Start with Vancouver, because I was in Toronto on Saturday and saw them play a game where they went up 2-0, but nobody in the building thought that game was over with at 2-0, even though the Leafs have struggled and had inconsistent efforts over the last few weeks. They had Spencer Martin in goal, and they slowly climbed back into the game and then won on a Jordy Ben goal in the third period. I saw a little bit of their next game, and they didn't play well. It was in Boston, I believe. Now they're playing the Sabres. Mm-hmm. The Sabres have lost 5 games in a row, but this is a battle of struggling teams right now. Mm-hmm. But Vancouver, the aura around that team is not good.
It's everything that I felt this morning coming from that team today was extremely negative. And I understand it's been a weird season. There's been a lot of losing, a lot of blown leads, a lot of everything. The only thing that's working for them is their power play, which, you can't live on your power play. No. Even though they're, even if you give them a lot of penalties, you're going to
penalties if they don't feel like you can score 5-on-5.
Right. And, listen, if they get a ton of power plays in a game, they got a better chance of winning. But everything that I got out of that, and it's, talking to a couple of guys, but also just kind of getting a sense of what, how everybody's acting, everybody feels, and it's just everything is very on edge. And even talking with Bruce Boudreau this morning, there's 2 kinds of Bruce. There's Bruce who's happy, go lucky, very very chatty, Gabby, like that's that's him, and that's normally how he is. Morning before a game, he's in better spirits. It's a new game, new day. Let's do this. He was not that today. He was very. It was like a post-game loss, Boudreau, who's
It wasn't like that in Philly earlier in the season either, Joe. It's a different feel because I think they've been failing him in what he feels like they should be doing for most of the season.
Mm-hmm. Well, Russ, the thing is that Rutherford has come out in 2 instances since the beginning of the season. I mean, first he said we didn't have a good training camp. And the insinuation was that was on the coach. And then he came out a couple days ago and pointed at the coaching again. So he's basically holding Boudreau's feet to the fire. And the problem here is, and I said this before we started recording, Rutherford did not hire Boudreau.
No.
The ownership did.
The whole thing is, honestly, it's a disjointed mess as far as what you're looking at management-wise. They don't have a cohesive plan. They just don't want to lose any players, so now they're just going to sign everybody. They'll sign Bo Horvat at top of the value for him too, where he's never going to get this kind of season in again, but they'll sign him for that, like they've been signing JT Miller at top of the value. Like everybody they spend too much money on, and nobody has one plan where they raise their hand and say, I think this is what we should be doing. Mm-hmm. And it's up to ownership to do that, and they don't. Ownership just like, we want to win. Okay.
Cool. Like, so does everybody else, but what's the plan?
Right.
Like that's it. It's again, my experience covering Buffalo it doesn't remind me of stuff that the Murray Sabres were doing, anything like that. It's very disjointed.
Yeah.
And the fact that, they kind of dragged Boudreau a little bit around in the summer, like, we're going to keep him out, we got to keep him, we got to do this, like, the season was over and you're thinking like, all right, well, they got to, sign Boudreau and take care of that. And they didn't do it right away. And Bruce was just kind of like, well, I'm here. I'm not going to go trying to grab another job. Like, you guys want me, so I'm waiting on you guys. And then it's just, it didn't happen right away. And now, this stuff with Rutherford just kind of taking his shots. It's like, all right, well, just, if this is the way it's going to be, just sever ties and call
just
it.
Fire him.
Just be done with it and like get rid of, like, take care of that angst, because if he's not the guy to coach your team moving forward, and
who is
still trying to save it, like, I don't know what you do.
I think now we're learning. Like, this probably wasn't Travis Green's fault either. Like, this is
no.
So like we're learning this. So it's like, who do you get? Bruce may be the best guy to keep around because he's not going to blow everything up and he's not going to do anything stupid. Well, if they're going to be bad, they might as well be bad with Bruce. Like, what are you going to do?
It might be a situation, Joe, where they, like most management teams, they realize they have one shot with a coach, that they don't want to waste that bullet in the middle of the season. They can't go out and get Barry Trotz. Barry Trotz probably is not going to take a job until next summer, and I don't know if
he wouldn't take that job.
And I don't know if he'd be right. I don't know if he'd be a good fit there. There's Alain Vigneault, there's Babcock, there's a lot of names out there, but I don't know if
Vigneault back to Vancouver.
Probably not. But I'm just saying,
Babcock, no freaking way.
No. Well, please, I don't think Babcock's ever getting another job.
No, I don't either.
Nope.
But so I don't know what direction they go. But
that's the thing. Like, you look at their organization, like what they've got in the minors, what they've got coming, prospect wise. I can't even tell what they're trying to do with their team.
No, you can't.
They're counting on, they brought in the kid from Russia. Well, he's 26, but like, you bring him in, you're like,
Kuzmenko. I knew he was a
Kuzmenko. Yeah.
Kuzmenko. I had spoken to people in Russia. One person in particular who always gives me information, and that person was like, he disappears a lot. I don't think he's going to be what they think they want him to be.
Right. So it's just like it's a ship with 1,000 holes, and you're just, trying to plug as many as you can, but the boat's still going to sink. You might be able to keep treading water, but you're still going down.
Well, anybody who looked at that team objectively knew that their problem was on the blue line. And what was their biggest free agent ad? It was Ilya Mikheyev. And don't get me wrong, that's Russ's favorite player, and he's got 4 goals in 13 games right now, and he's a decent player. He's quick. He's got size, but that's not what they needed. They needed to spend that $4.5 million on defense, and they didn't. And now they get injuries, and Hughes was out for a while. Ekman Larsson's old. They're playing guys like Kyle Burrows and. It's just not good, and you're sort of hanging out Thatcher Demko to dry.
Well, think about this: they hired Mike Yeo as one of the assistants. He didn't have a particularly good run with Philly, and if you put him in charge, he will not have a good run with Vancouver either. So I don't even know if they have an interim that they could use.
No, I don't know. Like, Mike Yeo's a good power play setup guy. Like, that's what he's good at. But like, that's Boudreau's specialty too. Like, every team he's coached has had an incredible power play. So, it's no different with Vancouver. Vancouver's power play is, we talked about it, is dynamite. But it's those same 5 guys. They're doing all the scoring, and it looks like it's a one-line team. But you've got all those guys spread out everywhere, and they're not picking. They're not able to carry each of their lines or their pairs. Like, it just doesn't work that way with them, and it's a severe lack of depth of talent, really.
Yeah, and I'm looking at Jason King, and he's a career assistant so far within the organization in the AHL and NHL. I don't think you could bring him into that. Like, they don't have anybody. They have to wait until the end of the season and then do another search if that's what they want to do. But I don't think that's going to help their results.
So Yeo could be an interim 2 years in a row. Right now, their second highest scoring defenseman is Luke Shen. That tells you something.
Now, good for Luke Shen. That's bad otherwise.
Yeah, I'm happy for Luke Shen. He has 2 Stanley Cup rings. His brother has a Stanley Cup ring in St. Louis. So the Shen brothers have had some success, but he even after his days in Toronto, he was never anything more than probably a 5-6. Mm-hmm. And in that, he's being forced to play top 4 minutes with the Canucks. Switching over to the Sabres now, Joe, they've had some injury issues on defense. Mm-hmm. Samuelson skated today. Yokiharu is supposedly going to be back tonight, but they have lost 5 games in a row. And again, where I thought they were sort of coming up short was the goaltending tandem of Eric Comrie and Craig Anderson. Now, if they have their full defense and if they're playing, if they're scoring, then I think you can cover up for that. But over the last 5 games, they gave up 7 to Vegas. They only gave up 3 to Boston. It was a 2-1 game and there was an empty netter. But I don't think that that goaltending is playoff level caliber.
I don't think the Sabres are in a playoff level position anyways this season. Right. That's not the spot that they're in. I look at it this way. It's a 5-game streak. Okay, rough. But the 4 of those losses are to Carolina, Tampa, Vegas, and Boston. Like, are the Sabres in the same, universe with them right now? Any of those teams? No, they're not. But the Carolina game was basically a 1-goal game. Aho gets the empty netter to make it 5-3. The Tampa game, they led in the 3rd period, lost that one. The Vegas game, Eichel goes bananas in the 3rd period. Like that's the difference there. Yep. But Vegas got out. They got out 1-0. Sabres punch back 1-1. Vegas makes it 2-1. Sabres score right again 2-2. It's 2-2 going into the 3rd.
Right.
Yeah, 2-2 going into the 3rd. So like they're played pretty well. It's just sometimes the superstar goes off and you're kind of helpless. And Michael scores that first goal, like it changed like it kind of sucked the air out of the room for the Sabres. And then the Boston game's probably the game they played the best in.
Right.
Played them very well. But it's Boston. They're better. And the only game out of those 5 that was the bad one was Arizona. And Arizona scored 3 fluke goals. But Buffalo didn't do anything to try to that was worthy of being in that game to try to make a difference. So that this is what this team is going to go through. They're young. I know the goaltending, like whatever. But goaltending to me is the least of the things you're worrying about right now. I mean, yeah, goaltending can keep you in some games and you want wins, obviously. But I mean, you're talking about a team that was without their top 2 2 of their top defensemen. And you're dealing with like a pile of guys out of the AHL. Labushkin's kept playing through something right now. Right. It's tough. It's really tough. You're asking a lot of Dahlin. You're asking a lot of Power. And Power's still a rookie. Mm-hmm. So I mean, you're putting Lawrence Pilot into some spots now where it's I don't think anything they were expecting him to be this much of a part of the lineup already. So it's a tricky situation, but I don't know. I look at 4 of those games against the four of the best teams in the league. They were in them. They were they were involved in them, but sometimes stuff happens, and it's a veteran team that's been together. Let
me ask you the question. So in March, Ukko-Pekka Luukkonen turns 24. At that point, is he going to be the goalie next year? Because 24, 25 is when you're expecting a goalie to sort of, kick it into gear. He hasn't quite kicked it into gear yet. Definitely not this year in the AHL. This is a big worry because they're going to have to make a decision because I don't think Levi's ready for the NHL either. And if neither are, they're going to have to move away from Craig Anderson and get a 2-year goalie.
Yeah. I mean, that's the spot that I think Kevin Adams is very aware that he's in. I do wonder about, they say the right things about Luukkonen, but I do wonder if they're all in on him. I think if they're all in on him, there would be more of a push to get him to the NHL. Mm-hmm. But different thing. I mean, the last few years, different things have waylaid his development. And even this year, like he's playing a ton of games, good. But they've gutted. Rochester's defense has been gutted by guys getting called up to Buffalo, and they're playing with four vet guys on PTOs to try to fill out the defense, so they weren't calling guys from Cincinnati. So I mean, it's a tough spot. Like it's a tough spot. Rochester's a really young team. Like that is a very young team outside of some of the guys that have been there for a few years. But I mean that you're talking about a team that's trying to develop Isak Rosén, Kulik, Kisakov, like young guys down there. Like they're gonna go through it, and it's kind of up to Luukkonen to hold down the fort, but. how you got to do it with guys that you didn't have in camp for a while. They're there trying to earn contracts and you're trying to make it work that way. But I think the important part is, yes, you want Luukkonen playing better, obviously, but he's getting the games. I think the games is the biggest part of it because he's been a pro for 3 years now.
Yeah.
And he had, I think coming into the season, he had 60 total pro games.
Yeah. He needs games.
He needs way more than that.
Yeah, I mean, he missed most of the one season with a groin surgery. So
he had double hip surgery,
labor.
Right. So that's my basic point. It may take him until 26 based on games. Levi's 20. He could be in Northeastern for another year for sure. And
well, if he is, that's bad news for Buffalo. If he stays in Northeastern another year, I think it's bad.
I know, but he's not going to play in the NHL next year anyhow.
No, but he might want to as a condition of him signing, he may have to play an NHL game or two to burn off the first year of the ELC.
Sure, I mean that's always fine, but Portillo is really like a backup.
That was what I was going to say.
I don't look at him as an NHL starter.
I don't look at him as a future Sabre.
There you go.
My thing. I don't feel very good about him becoming a part of the organization. I think his eyes are turned elsewhere. And the way he's playing this year, maybe he has some regrets about going back to school, but I don't know. It's a different Michigan.
It was a tough year for him with everything that came out. Like mentally, it may be tough for him.
Right. But I mean, that's another guy that just needs games. His freshman year, he backed up Strauss-Mann the entire year. Like he didn't play one game. Like he needs games.
And if you look at the landscape of what NHL goalies are potentially out there in terms of trade. I mean, free agent signing, there's Varlamov, but there's not a lot out there free agent wise. If you're talking about trade, it's goalies with big salaries that other teams want to get rid of. It's okay. Cal Peterson, former Sabre draft pick. I don't think that I think LA thinks, he's not played very well since he signed the big deal. Quick has been the number one goaltender. Maybe they're looking to jettison that deal, and I don't know if the Sabres would be interested. How about the $10 million of Sergei Bobrovsky? I mean, they can afford it in the short term. Maybe they get Florida to retain some salary to make it more palatable, but there's not a lot out there.
No, but they're going to have to do better if Luukkonen's not ready for next year.
Right.
Because next year is a year where you would want them to start to contend a bit.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
Yeah, it's the Peterson thing for LA. I boggles my mind. Like he was supposed to be their number one last year. I think that was supposed to be the plan. Like you slowly start to phase Quick out. He's getting older. The contract's coming to an end.
I think it's tough having Quick over his shoulder. I don't think that helps.
Possibly, but like Peterson's playing horrible. Like
I know, but he wasn't playing horrible last year, and you still got Jonathan Quick always sort of lurking. I don't think that helps.
Yeah, Peterson.
I don't know if I've got a goalie that his problem is he doesn't like to compete.
That's not where it is. It's not like he doesn't want to compete. It's kind of like Georgiev being behind Shesterkin. Like it's like Georgiev. He knew he had to get out of there if he ever wanted to be a big time goalie in the league. He probably felt like he always could be. And he was always going to be in the shadow. Peterson was the starter for like 10 minutes.
But Georgiev, even in the shadow of Shesterkin, put up above average stats or average stats. Right now, Cal Peterson
did last year.
Yeah, Cal Peterson, 406 goals against, 867 save percentage. It's only 6 games, I get it, but yeah, he's got to be better if he's going to try to steal the job away from Quick. But my point is, Joe, is like I don't see a great number. Like, okay, Nashville's got Askarov playing in Milwaukee. They have Saros as their number one. They're not trading Askarov. Why would they trade Askarov? They're going to keep him while he's on his ELC. They're going to keep him for a couple years until they know what they've got with him. And Russ and I are a little skeptical of Saros being a smaller statured goaltender. They're not going to all of a sudden trade off one or the other. They're going to keep one as an insurance policy.
Yeah. If I'm calling Nashville about a goalie, I'm calling about Connor Ingram. Honestly, like that's
right.
If you're looking for a guy that's got like the potential and he's younger, and he needs an opportunity. Like, I mean, he was dynamite in the AHL for the last couple of years, I think.
Yes.
And it's like, okay, well, this guy needs an opportunity. Well, he ain't getting it in Nashville. Like, as long as Saros is healthy, he ain't playing. And they picked him off of waivers from where, Tampa.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Playing Vasilevsky's there. Like he's not playing there. So I mean,
No.
Get him into a situation where he's got a chance to play. I mean, Buffalo would be pretty great for that, honestly. But
they lost him a couple weeks ago on waivers. Remember, Lankinen is their backup now, and they spent like $1.5 million on him. Connor Ingram went to Arizona. He got claimed on waivers by Arizona, and he, I don't expect any goaltender. Vemelka, Terry Sawchuk.
Nobody's doing great there.
Nobody's doing great in Arizona. So I don't think you can. It's a great measuring stick that right now he's 1-4. Right. But I agree. I think he's a goaltender who, in a perfect situation, could sort of overachieve. That's why, like with Buffalo, I didn't get that feeling going into the year about Eric Comrie. I always thought Eric Comrie was a good 2.
I think he's playing okay.
Yeah, no, he's not. No, but Russ, they brought him in as potentially a guy, as the guy who would fill the gap in between now and either Luukkonen or Levi. And I just don't buy that.
They brought him in for that. That's a mistake. But I thought they brought him in just to get 30 games in. That's what I
think that's what they did. I think they thought that Comrie could be, a cheap sort of gap filler for 2 years until they find another goaltender. And I just don't know. Like if that was their plan, then they clearly are seriously not ready to challenge for a playoff spot. But I think they sold that, this team is making progress and we've got.
Here's the weird part. Even though Comrie's numbers aren't great, he's got 4 wins. So,
he's shown some of, like, I think of the Edmonton game where, I think the Oilers had 23 shots in the third period trying to get back into that game, and he stood on his head. He was great. Yeah, he was absolutely great. So, that ability is there. That's a hometown game for him too. Like, he's from Edmonton. Yeah. So, it's a little bit of a Hulk up there, but I don't know. These past 5 games have shown that there are some issues with forwards remembering to get back to defensive rotations. Dahlin skates in and he's taking, he's going at the net. Well, somebody's got to get back there and help out. You don't have Samuelson back there, so it's you're kind of stuck, because if you got Samuelson there, he's going to take care of business. Yeah. But you still need a forward to help out, because otherwise you're going to have 2 and 3-on-1s going the other way, which look what's happened the last 5 games. There's been a ton of those odd man rushes. So, you're asking a lot of these. Eichel could have had 5 goals in the Vegas game. Comrie stopped 2 of his breakaways. So, it's things like that where, you're asking a lot of your goalies if you're not helping to cover for each other. And that part of the game for Buffalo, that's not the young guys' fault mostly. Sure. That's a lot of experienced guys that are just
one last addition to the Sabres talk, but it's also Devils talk, and maybe one other team that he played well with. We just had the Hockey Hall of Fame have their inductions. How come Alexander McGillney can't get in? What's going on?
How much time do we have? Because
but it seems crazy.
It is. It's insane. His story to me, and I exhausted myself years ago beating the drum for Adam Oates to get it in, which shouldn't have been necessary to make the case for him.
Right.
And I feel the same way about McGillney. I shouldn't have to make the case for him, but people need to hear it every year. Like, what the hell are you doing? Why isn't this guy in there? The story of him getting into the NHL alone, to me, is enough.
Yeah,
get him in. That alone.
Yeah, I've got a recording with Bob Swatos. I'll play it for him anytime they want it.
Mm-hmm.
It's a movie.
76 goal season. It's sets a Sabre record for goals in a season. Like, okay, 400 whatever goals in the NHL. I know, you can look at the raw numbers and be like, well, it doesn't stack up to whatever. It's like half of his career was played in the trap era. Like, right. What do you want? Right. Still wins a cup, still got a cup with Jersey.
Yep.
Was a tremendous player in Toronto.
Yep.
A great player in Buffalo. Was great with the Devils. Lou got weird with him at the end. That's the only thing.
Pretty good with the Canucks. And Matt Sundin said that he was the best winger that he played with in his entire tenure in Toronto.
Yeah,
and that's not.
Pat LaFontaine said something similar about him. He said he's one of the most gifted, skilled players he's ever played with. Maybe the most skilled, gifted.
And that's saying something considering what LaFontaine could do.
Right. Yeah. So it's crazy to me that you've got all these people that are Hall of Fame level players or Hall of Famers already saying like this guy was the most unbelievable guy to play with.
Right.
Hey, what's going on? It's you're gonna like this. You're gonna like this reference. Both of you guys probably. It's a lot like when people were beating the drum for Rush to get in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. Like, these guys have influenced everybody. Like, how are they not in the Rock and Roll? Well, they're kind of nerdy and like I don't like them. Like, okay, well, that's a you problem. That's not a them problem. They're great. Put them in the Hall of Fame. Take care of business. Same thing with McGillney. Like, you got an issue with him? Like, okay, like maybe it's the Russian. Maybe it's the Russian factor now.
Yes.
For the people in the chat room,
HL. So like, I don't know.
Joe, for the people in the chat room that are saying didn't do well in the playoffs, he had 86 points in 124 games. That's not bad.
But by the way, look at his stats in 2002 when Matt Sundin was hurt. Mm-hmm. It was a line of McGillney with who was it? Shane Corson that carried them through the first round against the Islanders. Mm-hmm. And then I think he was their second leading. It was Gary Roberts was their leading scorer. I think he was their second leading scorer in those playoffs. And that was without Matt Sundin. They got to the conference finals that year, and McGillney was one of the big reasons why.
Yeah, so McGillney had 11 assists with the Islanders with the Devils in their cup run. And he was like tied for third with Rafalski for playoff assists for them. Like he had excellent.
Plus a sneaky lost year for the Sabres is the 1992-93 season because that was the 76 goal season. That was him and LaFontaine being the dynamic duo in the NHL. And they played
Montreal.
That was Montreal in the second round, but that was the Mayday year.
Yes.
Sweeping Boston out in the first round. But Montreal, McGillney breaks his ankle, like in game 1, game 2. And then LaFontaine gets injured like in game 2 or game 3. And then they're toast. But I mean, that Montreal team won the Stanley Cup that year, so like whatever. But like
he had 7 goals in 7 games.
Right. So I mean
in the playoffs.
It's a freak show type of thing. And maybe Buffalo could beat Montreal that year. I don't know. Montreal was the destiny team that year. They won every overtime game. They played in. Like, it was a freak show thing. But plus it's Patrick Waugh. I mean, come on, let's get real. But I just it's things like that where something pops up and it's just kind of like you forget about him a little bit. And to me, he's an unforgettable player. He was the human highlight reel. Just the speed was breathtaking. His skill was incredible. And then, you have him and Bure playing in the league at the same time. It was like, geez, we got a wealth of riches now with these unbelievably talented players. And then Fedorov's in right after him. It's like McGillney opens the door for all these guys to come over and made it a big deal. And I don't think enough credit is given for that. And I do wonder if a lot of the feeling on Russia has to do with it, or if it's
again, like
I don't know.
This is an international place. This is not the NHL Hall of Fame, where some people actually call it that, and it makes me bristle.
Yeah,
this is an international place.
Yeah,
I mean, he's just I don't know. It blows my mind that people can watch highlights of him and be like, nah, not a Hall of Fame.
Yeah, 1,032 points in 990 games.
Yeah. And half of that in the trap era. Like, come on.
Yeah. No, I think he's a no-brainer, but yeah, it may take a few more years. Let's just touch on this. Let's just touch on this before we end the show. Kyle Dubas came out and spoke to the media yesterday, Joe, revealed the status on Jake Muzzin. No surprise, we thought since there was not a lot of info that came out after the injury that it was something of a serious nature. It sounds like they're resigning. I mean, they're going to have it medically reviewed before the trade deadline, but it sounds like he's out for the year and maybe out for his career. We don't know for sure. They lost TJ Brody for a couple weeks, but it's not a serious injury. But the talk around Toronto is right now, like obviously they're going to have to go out and get a defenseman because right now their blue line without Jake Muzzin, they might be able to win a round depending on who they play, but I don't think that they can make a deep playoff run with their defense the way it is.
No, I 100% agree with that. You're asking a lot of Sandin and Liljegren to really step up. Yeah. Maybe, I mean, I think in a perfect world they're ready already. I think Liljegren's great. I'm a huge fan of his. I think if he ever goes back to the AHL, it's a mistake.
No,
I agree.
I don't think there's a shot he should ever go back. But I mean, you're looking at that crew, and it's all on Morgan Riley to carry everything, and he's been doing that for years now. Like,
this is how much it's on Morgan Riley, Joe. Like, okay, so the first 3 or 4 games when Liljegren came back, he was playing with Riley and playing pretty well. Mm-hmm. Then all of a sudden Brody goes down, and they've elevated Giordano to a top 4. Giordano's 39 years old. It's a trust issue with Keefe. He's got Sandin and Liljegren on the bottom pairing playing 13 or 14 minutes, and he's playing Giordano and Justin Hall. Justin Hall shouldn't play 20 minutes on a friggin' peewee team. But he is on the Leafs because they supposedly trust him, and he's a right-handed shot. And Jordy Ben is playing on the top pairing with Morgan Riley. I mean, come on.
Scored a goal the other day, didn't he?
Come on.
Well, I mean, listen, you could be having to run out Keith Petruzzelli every game now in goal. But,
right.
I mean, there's
Quinnipiac. I pointed that out. Quinnipiac's Keith Petruzzelli.
Nice. This is it's a bad situation, but this was something that I don't remember. I don't know if I said it here, if it was on maintenance day or something somewhere. Maybe on Twitter. I don't know. I talk a lot of places.
Maybe into your pillow. Like, who knows?
It could be, maybe. But I looked up and down the Leafs lineup, and like their top 6 forwards, it's incredible. Some of the best group in the NHL. They're going to score a ton of goals. Great. Beyond that, though, I was like, I don't know about this group. And then the defense, you're like, well, if everybody stays healthy, that you can get by with that. You can be okay with that. Now it's no, like they're in a very bad spot. Like unless they're going to start using Sandin and Liljegren as their number 2 pair, which I can't see that. They can't see them doing right now.
No,
I don't know how you deal with this right now, other than tell Matthews to score 3 goals a game, or tell him and Tavares to just go absolutely animal style and just score everything possible. Tell Nylander to get crazy and score a ton of goals. I don't know if there's a team that can score their way out of problems, it is the Leafs. But man, oh man, getting by during the regular season is not what the Leafs are supposed to be doing right now. It's supposed to be a team that's gearing up for the playoffs. The entire regular season is about getting ready to the playoffs and try to win the first round and go deep. But man, and it's crazy like saying all this because they got 19 points. They're second division, so it's like they're sitting okay, but it's very foreboding with all these issues and all the problems and all the complaints about everything. It's a little awkward.
Yeah, and as I said earlier, Matt Murray, the Leafs are playing Pittsburgh in Pittsburgh tonight. Matt Murray is getting his first start since opening night. I was up there in Toronto.
A long time in between starts.
Exactly 1 month ago, where he injured an adductor muscle in the morning skate. Mm-hmm. They've been able to tread water with Samsonov first, and by the way, he's skating too, so it doesn't sound like maybe a week or 2 away. But Eric Shalgren, kept their head above water. Hasn't played very well. He's played okay, but just good enough for them to get victories and points, and that's was a necessity. But no, they need Murray to stay healthy, and they need him to win, and they need Samsonov to come back. But their defense, Joe. I said we had Jeff Merrick on our Off the Post show on Sunday, and I said to him, I said, St. Louis needs defense. Ottawa needs defense. Toronto needs defense. Good luck. Nobody's trading defense right now. They're not going to be available until December or January. It's not going to happen.
If at all, because teams have started to hoard defensemen because they know it just takes one injury or 2 to really knock down what you're able to do with your pairs. We all thought it was kind of weird in Buffalo, when Botterill was just kind of hoarding defensemen and just stashing them everywhere. What's he doing? Turned out to be a good idea because guys just drop off, they get hurt, stuff happens. And Buffalo prepared for that this year. It's just you can't prepare for 4 guys going down. And Toronto's just stuck because the cap situation's brutal. There's nothing they can do to get around that. They have to monkey around with it just to be able to call guys up sometimes. And
I'll give you the biggest reason in my mind why this is a bad year for Toronto to kind of just be floundering around and just get into the playoffs is because they need the right matchup. If they get the wrong matchup again in the first round,
Yeah,
you need to win the division, but
I agree.
Otherwise, you're playing Florida or Tampa in the first round, and good luck.
And the cap, I mean, the Muzzin injury and him going on LTIR alleviates that slightly. They will have cap space, but right now they're on. I mean, if there was somebody placed on waivers and they wanted to pick them up, and it was somebody who they thought they couldn't do it because they're at 50 contracts.
Right, that's their other bugaboo.
So, yeah, well, a lot of things.
I don't know how they deal with that one. That you got to make a 2-for-1 trade or something there, but like it's
Well, they lucked out in that Abe Kubel got picked up on waivers from Washington. And then Samsonov went down, and they had to sign Petrozelli to a ELC because they didn't have a backup goaltender. So it's just bizarre. Anyway, Joe, thank you for joining us on short notice. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Joe.
No,
we will be back tomorrow with another edition of the Hockey Buzzcast. For Joe Yurden, for Russ Cohen, I'm Michael Agello. Thank you for watching. And remember, without the buzz, it's just hockey.